Well, now I need to make sure that, okay. So there's somebody in the waiting room. Okay, that's good. Let's see the waiting room. Mab is there. Amy's there. I need to correct this. That was weird. Okay. So it's already recording.
Yes.
So can we edit this part down if we need to?
Mm-hmm.
Although that seems like doing too much work.
Chop off the front. That's easy.
Okay.
Right.
Well, that's the last two people that just got the thing from me. So there's 10 waiting. Good.
Oh yeah, there it is. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it's not cold. 12. Oh, Susan Henry. All right, I can put that down.
I guess let me know.
Okay, I think I'm good. I'll go and blow a glass of water because this tea, black tea that's steeped too long and it is untenable. For the devil didn't make me do it. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Sunny, you're the best.
All right. Green allowed.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, everyone.
Let me see, I can, aha. Is everybody in? All right. Is everybody in? Get the gallery going. Hey, look, there's Dana. Hi, Jill. Hi, everybody. I'm just getting this figured out. I am new to the world of working with Zoom in the last few weeks, so I'm sure you know how it is. Oh, there's Peg. There's my last little lamb. And Maria. All right, everybody there. We're all.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, we're almost all here. Great. Right on time. All right.
Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can. Yay, I figured it out.
Fantastic.
Hi.
Hi.
Is it just me right now?
Say that again.
Is it just me right now? We're waiting for the others?
Lay down.
There's 20 other people in here right now.
Woohoo! Party.
Hi, Carla.
Who is that? Hi.
Can everybody? I see Susan back there.
Is there a way? Can I interrupt? I'm sorry. Is there a way to see everybody, or am I supposed to just see you?
No, if you look at the top, there should be along the top bar. If you slide up there, there should be a thing that says speaker view or gallery.
On the right-hand side.
Yep, on the right. If you go up to the right-hand side and you click on gallery, you should see all of our members.
Hollywood Squares.
Absolutely. I feel like I'm in Romper Room when I do this. Hi, Sako. I know I'm supposed to talk to everyone individually, but I'm so happy to see all of you.
Maisie, come here. Maisie.
That one.
Okay. Oh, and there's April. We have a few stragglers. I want to make sure I get as many people in as possible before I start talking.
Let's see.
It is recommended that you put yourself on mute unless we are
Oh.
in a question and answer section, so we don't get washed over with ambient noise. There is a chat bar on the right-hand side that will allow you to type questions in, and I will attempt to get to them as the material allows. I'm very into the interactive part. Just figuring out how to do it in this world. Okay, so there's a few more of us coming, I think, but I'm going to get started. Hi, everybody. I'm Madam Onça. I've done a lot of online teaching in the last few weeks, but this is the first time I've taught on Zoom. I have been in other meetings, and of course my children are using it for school. So I have been on the, going over their shoulder this whole time, but this is the first time I've been in charge of all the little buttons. So if you know things I don't know, by all means, point them out so that I can better meet your needs. I'm very appreciative of everybody making this time. This is being recorded, and I will find a way to make sure that it's available for you if you want later as well, so that you can review the material.
Awesome.
Yeah. So if you have a tarot deck, I want to encourage you to get it out and pull out a few of the cards. We're specifically working with maybe 5 cards today. If you don't have a deck with you, that's totally fine. I will hold my cards up so you can look at them. We are working with the scary cards today, which is very much in quotes, because the scary cards are definitely our friends. They have a lot of useful information for us. But that is going to be the Devil card, the Wheel of Fortune, the Hanged Man, Death, and the Tower. So those are, we're doing sort of a little deep dive with them. In the last few weeks, I have done a fairly exhaustive series of online classes covering the basics of the rest of the deck. This class presumes that you either have a basic awareness of tarot or that you are willing to catch up and just absorb the information that you can at this time. I'm happy, of course, to answer questions, but if it's about basic tarot structure and so forth, maybe we should catch up after. My YouTube channel has a fairly exhaustive series of talking head videos where I talk about all the various cards and their structure and their history, and I'm always happy to point you to my elders and betters and the people who know far more than I do about these things, so that I can send you up to the masters. But my specialty is connecting with really wonderful people who want to work with me in the way that I like to chat and do things. So making sure we're letting in the next person. Hi, we're just getting started now, Delia. So I came to tarot over 20 years ago. I am the artist and co-author of the World Spirit Tarot. I know some of you have that book and deck. This is the 2nd edition of it. It's very much a traditional deck. So if you have any deck that is in the Rider-Waite-Smith family, the information will definitely work for you. Even the very old decks, the Marseille Tarot and that sort of thing, the information should cross over. Somebody's asking what the cards are that we're going to do tonight. We will be doing the Devil, the Tower, the Wheel of Fortune, the Hanged Man, and Death. So this is a walk in the dark is the name of this class. It's just a chance to look at some of the cards that make people go, ooh, when they're getting a tarot reading. If you have them, pull them on out. In fact, here on one of the many happy faces that we have is Dana Jones, who was nice enough to actually go through the book and help me do the editing. Because while I'm a writer, a talker, and an artist, I'm not much of an editor. So Dana helped with that. Thanks. So again, we're going to work today with these, the scary cards. All of these cards are our friends when it comes to giving us access to useful information. So I definitely say, scary with quoting marks, but they are the cards that if you are reading for a friend, or if you start reading, for clients, they're the ones that make them go, the cards that you need to be prepared as a speaker, as a healer, as a diplomat. You need to be prepared to help people receive the information that these cards have to give, because they're the ones that make you catch your breath. The meanings in all of the cards, of course, evolve over the centuries. Tarot started hundreds and hundreds of years ago as a game. It was just a game. All of the meanings and symbolism that have accreted to it over the centuries are really a matter of, it's a mutual system of symbols we have agreed upon. And you will notice as you dig into the cards that those symbols and the meanings evolve over time. So sometimes that means, okay, thank you. Sometimes that means that you will open up a book to read about your card and wonder how in the world it could simultaneously mean all of these various things. Sometimes there's a through line of meaning that you might have missed, and that's part of what we're going to talk through with these shadowy cards today. Sometimes it's just literally because these cards have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, and people's perspectives and values have changed about them. Again, feel free to pop any questions over here and I will try to get to them. But the first card that we're going to start with is the Devil. So if you want to find your Devil card, if you have a sort of an unconventional deck, that card may have another name. And if you don't have one, that's fine. I will share with you. This is the Rider-Waite-Smith version. This is sort of the classic. Comes in many colorations. You know, you'll see it painted in many ways, but this is the sort of basic drawing. It's from around 1907, I want to say. This was not my favorite card to begin with because, of course, as a neo-pagan person, I live my life outside the sort of Christian paradigm, and I thought this art was very off-putting. But we're going to talk a little bit more about what is really cool about it. And if you've been in a class with me before, you've heard me speak at great length about the woman who made this particular deck of cards. Her name is Pamela Coleman Smith. Fascinating person to study as a Victorian female entrepreneur. Was really determined to make her own way in a time period when women really lacked agency, and as a woman in the arts and as a woman entrepreneur, you know, talk about some invisibility. So she's a fascinating person to study. I just did a bunch of research on this deck, and it turns out she actually created this deck in 5 months, which is amazing to me because it took me about 5 years to do the art for mine, working at it very intensively. The originals of hers were all lost in one of the world wars, which is why all of the colorings are different. They're kind of done by every person who pokes along. But you can see this is very much in the Adam and Eve, you know, God good, devil bad sort of version of events. And that is part of our history in tarot. When I made my own deck, I wanted to lean into something that still reflected what this card is often about. However, I wanted to make the devil a bit more seductive, as it were. So that's my version of the same art. Meaning is pretty much the same. Every artist who comes to making a deck of tarot cards finds their own way with this. The thing about the devil card, when it comes up in a reading, typically the devil, the art, he's usually portrayed as like a monster, as a jailer. And I also want to mention that gender is irrelevant, you know, when it comes to this card coming up. But because the devil is portrayed in mythology and culture, you know, as a he, I'm going to use that as a default, but gender is irrelevant in the tarot as far as I'm concerned. I wanted to make him a little bit more seductive because this card is about letting your life get away from you, letting your life slide out of balance. It can be very much about addiction, obsession, compulsion, not always in bad ways. It can also be workaholism. It can be, you know, it can be the person who eats too much sugar, but it can also be the person who, you know, works out more than is healthy for them. It is really about too much Christmas. It is about whatever it is, having too much of a good thing until it is a destructive influence in your life. So when the devil card comes up, he is always speaking to, again, this notion of our lives out of balance. And we see in this, in the old version of the card, he has this inverted pentacle up between his horns. I know some of you know this already, but it's worth mentioning. Symbolically, what that is intended to represent in the card, if a pentacle, if a 5-pointed star represents the 5 sort of limbs, extremities of a human, head, arms, feet, presuming that you've got 2 of each of those for the purpose of this. The pentacle suggests that the genitals are above the head. So what it means in being inverted, it suggests that rather than mind over matter, you are putting matter over mind. And basically that you are being driven sort of by your carnal impulses rather than by your higher angels, someone might say. I don't personally subscribe to that perspective, but that is part of the history of the card. Now the devil card has been given, obviously, addiction, obsession, life out of balance. All of these things describe a disruption in your life and disruption in the fabric of your health and your wellness. But I've got a few more waiting to get in who are late. Hold, please. Everybody in now? Hi. There we go. Right, and Carla, I'm gonna mute your audio because we can hear you rustling. It's nothing personal. There you go. Okay, so while the devil card represents things out of balance, your life being disrupted and so forth, of course, the devil card, for all the reasons we have discussed, has been handed a lot of cultural baggage, of course, as well. The devil card doesn't always represent the bad things. And you will find as you study various decks, if you get into working with different people's art, different people's reading, you can do a dive with all of these cards into not just what the artist drew or what the symbols that have been handed down over the centuries, but the sort of myths that are behind them. So the devil, while he has all this cultural baggage to carry, he's been made to represent unseen and unpredictable forces in a situation, evil, weakness of character, temptation and seduction, self-destruction, insurrection against authority. So again, you see why when this card comes up, people go, ah! But the devil card also, in mythology, the devil also stands for rebelling against tyranny. He also stands for being honest about the way that things are, rather than putting a gloss of, sort of a patina of pretty over things. He obviously speaks to, physical pleasure. And at the time when the deck that we now know really sort of codified around 100 some years ago, the Victorians reviled, they reviled the pleasures of the flesh to a certain extent. I mean, they had different cultural baggage around that than we do. And so we can say, not all pleasure is bad. It's a matter of where you are on the spectrum. The devil also represents adventure. It represents fertility, and not just procreative fertility, but a certain amount of like artistic and creative abundance and juiciness, and sympathy, for our animal instincts. So much of what we see in the tarot, particularly in the swords cards, which is a whole other conversation, so much of the challenge that we see in the swords cards, I believe, is because the swords, which represent our intellect, so much of the challenge that we see represented in those cards is intellect separated from sympathy for our animal selves. The swords cards are almost universally very difficult cards, and they describe the kind of trouble that we can get ourselves into when we don't listen to our instincts in addition to our logic, when we function as a fractured being, as a fractured mammal. So I feel that while the devil card certainly has a lot to say about your workaholism and you're eating too much sugar and you're binge watching too much or drinking too much wine while you're in quarantine or whatever your vulnerabilities might be right now, he also has a lot to say about making sure that you that you honor the mammal that you are, and not just the sort of intellect and spirit that you are. I hope that makes sense. There's another piece I wanted to mention about it too, and this is very nuanced in the context of a reading. Of course, you've just been given a huge amount of information, right, about this card represents everything from liberty to libertinism, from autonomy to self-destruction. When you have this card come up in a reading, there are several ways that you can decide how you might choose to interpret it. You can interpret it based on what I'm telling you, like the sort of encyclopedic information that you store in your noggin about what all the cards are about, you know, from reading, from listening, from watching. There's the actual image and the way that it plays relative to the other cards around it. This is a pictorial interpretation of the tarot. And this is the part where if you're a very sort of a type A or linear rational type person, you're going to have to lean into the squishy, spongy, intuitive edges of your sense of yourself. Because if you say, well, you know, is the devil card here a force of liberation or a force of destruction? You're going to look at the cards around it. You're going to look at the way the colors in that card, whatever colored version of that card you have, how they harmonize or are dissonant with the cards around it. It's very much a place where you have to lean into your sense of intuition and art rather than just repeating the words somebody told you. It's about finding the relationship between that card and other cards, which is true in any reading. Additionally, when you put down, if you've pulled 3 cards, and let's say you've done a past and a present and a future reading, if you put that devil card down and both of the other cards with it clearly are spiky and prickly and difficult, or they depict a lot of emotional distress, you're going to have a pretty good sense not only of where it is in your past, present, future relative to your question, but you're going to be able to look at it and go, clearly this is part of a difficult emotional situation. Whereas if you put that card down and it is surrounded by, you know, bunnies and kitties and everything that is cheerful in the deck, then it's probably not the devil on his worst day, if that makes sense. So that is all a matter of finding your style of reading and intuition. The last thing I want to say about the devil is that, again, while this card speaks to some of the most painful aspects, potentially, of our lives with self-destructive impulse, addiction, imbalance, overwork, all of these kind of things, it can speak to both perversion, and I use this word very carefully, and the reverse of that, by which I mean sometimes the devil card at its best is encouraging you to look at things that are hard and messy in you, get some air around them, give them a little bit of attention and healing, or maybe let the beast out of its cage a little bit. Because if you don't look at these things, if you don't let them have any air at all, then the risk that the devil speaks to is of you turning your natural, you turning those things against yourself. It's the place where the self-destructive, you know, it's, most of us don't wake up and say, you know what I'd love to do today is get a really great, devastating drug habit. That's not what happens for most people. That sort of thing, when it unfolds in our life, is the result of an insidious, like a slow walk towards a difficult situation rather than jumping headlong into it. So this card encourages you to get some air around things and be able to discuss things that are difficult and sort of, again, let your beast out of the cage before it takes you over and you find that you're one of those people who's loudly protesting one thing in the streets and then secretly doing it in your closet. That's, the devil would love you to not do that, if that makes sense. All right, if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to repeat, reiterate, explain, describe. And then we're gonna jump from the devil to the next one. Everybody good? This is nice, it's faster. You're good? Okay, good, thank you. There's even it's weird, but there's even a little thing I think you can, the little reaction thing on the bottom that gives you thumbs ups if you want to do that. It's kind of cheesy, but I just found out that it's there. All right, we're gonna go from the devil, from our walk in the dark with the devil. Let's go over to the Wheel of Fortune. Wheel of Fortune. Where did it go? All right. This card, while it is not, it's not as It's not as emotionally evocative for people when you're doing readings. In other words, it doesn't have the same ooh, ah, gasp factor that the devil does or some of the other ones we're going to work with today. But the Wheel of Fortune is a tricky card when it comes up because it is alignment neutral if you are a sort of gaming nerd. It is neither good nor bad, but it definitely represents forces that are out of your control. Here is the Rider-Waite-Smith version of the Wheel of Fortune. We see here symbols of the elements, the Wheel of Fortune itself. It's very mystical looking. Incidentally, the symbols of the elements that are in the corners are all winged angels because they're also the 4 Catholic ones, because Pamela Coleman Smith, a few years after she made this deck, actually converted to Catholicism. She was already on her way, but she loved art so much that she would make art about anything. Here's my version. Again, it's really the same thing. I just wanted to dress the traditional imagery in something that offered more and different representation for people of different ethnicities, body types, places in the world, places in the spiritual spectrum. So, and the deck that you are working with may be different. Typically, the Wheel of Fortune is going to have some kind of a wheel and be populated with some people. This one is not too complicated, but again, it throws a wrench into your reading. Traditionally, when the Wheel of Fortune comes up in a reading, it speaks to a reversal of fortune. So if you're on the top of it now, it's a reminder that at some point you're going to be on the down, and vice versa. My experience, however, as a reader, when it comes up in a reading, it's not always like if today's your best day, tomorrow's your worst day. It's not that simple. It's not that simplistic. Sometimes it shows up almost like the magic 8-ball, and it's really saying, you know, ask again later. It's as if you just don't have all the information. There are things moving into the sphere of influence relevant to your question that are going to need a little time to unfold in order for you to have the full information. So it can be a change of fortune, it can be a reversal of luck, or it can just be like a recalibration. Again, our lives are not often, you know, that's not so much a switch being flipped as a dial being turned. I think it was Rachel Pollack, who is a great tarot scholar, and I can never say enough good things about her work. She made 78 degrees of wisdom, and she's a master reader and writer on the subject. I believe it was her who coined the phrase Torah, Tarot, Orat, Rota, which is just the 4 letters that I think we actually, you know, in fact, it's the 4 letters that we see in this old one, the T and the A and the R and the O. And it literally just means the tarot is the book that tells the story of the Wheel of Fortune. Just a clever bit of whimsy on her part. Torah, Tarot, Orat, Rota. A thing to know also, as far as leaning into the mythology of the cards, we have different ways that we can access the information. You can memorize what I tell you today. You can memorize what you read in a book. You can deduce what you see in the art and the emotional response that it has for you. These are all totally valid ways to get some movement as far as understanding. Part of the mythology, though, of the Wheel of Fortune, in Italian, you know, Donna Fortuna, Lady Luck, is a person. You know, she's a deity. And while the Wheel of Fortune as a mechanism seems very impersonal, like just sort of like a water wheel that moves luck from place to place, Donna Fortuna is an entity. You know, my husband is a professional juggler and jester, so she's the patron saint of people in his job. And he said, you know, best case scenario, you prefer if Lady Luck doesn't notice you at all, because anytime the forces that are represented by gods pay attention to you, it makes your life more complicated. But if Lady Luck has noticed you, then you definitely would like to appease her. The traditional images of Lady Luck, she's holding the wheel and she's holding a sheaf of wheat. Because for people in a more agrarian time, they were, you know, one harvest from famine. And so much of it depended on, you know, you could do a great job at your job as a merchant or a farmer and so forth. but there was this element of luck and sort of appeasement of the fates that was part of it. It seems so relevant to me thinking about it this week, because we have found in the Corona times that so many of us are one paycheck away from a kind of, famine and tumult and upheaval in our society. So maybe we need to think about what we can do for Lady Luck right now to bring her around for us. Yeah. So the Wheel of Fortune, when it comes up in a reading, your job as a reader for yourself, and if you are reading for someone else, for a friend, for a client, for a family member, you're always trying to understand what is the message of the wheel at the time. I would not advise saying, oh yeah, Wheel of Fortune, if you're up, you're down, good luck. It's your job to always build a bridge for the person you're reading for, and for yourself if it's you that you're reading for. You're always trying to build a bridge of actionable items, ways that people can take action on their lives to feel empowered to change the outcome if they don't like it. If they're not feeling good about a sudden reversal of fortune, part of the information you're trying to extract from a reading is always, how can I help? How can I be in service to this person in order to make this the best possible spin of that Wheel of Fortune that I can? Again, if you have questions, let me know. We're going to be switching over. An hour flies by, so we're going to switch over to the next card, which is going to be the Hanged Man. I'm surrounded by little cards here. Here is the traditional rendition. Hey, I know that one. There's my version. I feel like we're like clinking glasses, Susan. Cha-ching. So here's the Hanged Man. It's important to note that symbolically that this card he's both making the letter 4 with his body, which is very stable, but he has inverted his body. So he has taken the known and turned it on its head. It's also essentially an image of the dying and reborn God, if you want to think about it mythologically speaking. So many cultures have had some version of that, whether it's Jesus, Osiris. In this case, we can see the one who hung themselves from the yew tree in order to go on a vision quest and bring back some useful information for the humans. So this is definitely a card that speaks to sacrifice. This is one of those cards that comes up for folks in readings, and they tend, again, to go, oh, it's got the Hollywood gasp factor. However, again, I would say that the alignment of this card, if you want to think of it that way, is neither good nor evil. It's pretty much neutral, and everything that we bring to it, everything we deduce from it in a reading, really helps us to determine how we're going to experience what he has to offer. This is a card a lot of people have a personal attachment to. Except for jugglers, I don't know a lot of people who have an emotional connection to the Wheel of Fortune. Maybe jugglers and gamblers, I don't know. But a lot of people have an emotional attachment. You do? Have an emotional attachment to the Hanged Man. And I hesitate to use the word totemic because that's a problematic word for us to use outside the right cultural context. But a lot of people find the Hanged Man relatable. Let's put it that way. I'm sure that he's tattooed on more than one person. When he comes up, his shadowy attributes, the aspects of the Hanged Man that are troubling for a person, for a querent when that comes up, it suggests being hung up, like literally all hung up, like I can't seem to get unstuck from my spot, hung up or bogged down. It speaks to a frustrating state of delay. Like you're trying to make a decision and you get the Hanged Man, you're sort of like, yeah, I knew I wasn't making any progress. Thanks for telling me that, tarot cards. So it speaks to a potentially irritating state of delay. It can speak to the relinquishment of pleasure. It's very much a card of giving up stuff. And of course, again, to make an analogy based on the readings I've been doing for people lately to this time, we are all making sacrifices, the small sacrifice of our daily rhythm, for the greater good. And our experience in that is that most of us feel cooped up and crazy, even though we know rationally that it's part of doing our part. So it's the relinquishment of pleasure. The very old interpretations of this card sometimes was of treason and betrayal. So stick that in your ear in case you need to have that information. My experience with this card most of the time, however, is a much more modern interpretation. It's really that sense of being hung up, or that sense of relinquishment, is at its best. It is meaningful sacrifice. It is short-term sacrifice for long-term goals. That is, you may feel like you're living in the dark side of that card, but it is in fact a gift of that card, that what you are doing in the long run has meaning for you. It also comes up a lot around codependency. So it's the card of when that sense of being hung up is literally, but I gave up everything for you. And the other person is like, I didn't ask you to do that. So it can be codependency. It can be interdependency at its best, and codependency, which is unrequited martyrdom at its worst. So this card has a lot to say about how we give of ourselves. Is the gift that we're offering something people need? Is it something people want? Or what are we expecting in return? Are we martyring ourselves because we don't know how else to interact? Or are we giving of ourselves because of generosity of spirit? Are we giving of ourselves because it is secretly transactional and we haven't admitted that to ourselves? So this is a great, very nuanced card, but you definitely want to look at that. Where are you in the sacrifice to codependency question? Other aspects of it that can be really positive. From way up there, the hangman has an opportunity to not rush into things and get a really big sense of the perspective. They're literally up above everybody else looking around. They are potentially in that vision quest. That sense of sacrifice can literally be, I'm on a vision quest to figure out what gives my life logos, what gives my life meaning, what informs my actions, meaning, as far as meaning goes. It can be waiting for the right time to act. He's not hanged by the neck, he's hung by the ankle. He can clearly get down from this any time that he chooses to get down from this tree. So it's a matter of finding the right time to act, to have the biggest impact. And I find this card comes up a lot when it's around things like questions, should I go back to school? Should I go back to grad school? Clearly that could mean a couple years of eating ramen and having a really tight schedule. But if you believe that it is part of fulfilling a bigger picture, a bigger mission for you, then it may be a meaningful sacrifice, right? If it's, just that you don't know how to not be a martyr to, your kids or your job, then maybe you haven't quite got the balance right. So the hanged man. He has a lot to say about the best and worst of how we treat ourselves. I would say that maybe some of the advice that the hanged man has as one of the scary cards is that if we treat ourselves as well as we would ask other people to treat themselves, we would treat ourselves a lot better and with a lot more deliberation. So there's our hanged man. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them up over here. And we're going to jump from the hanged man to the death card. Dun, dun, dun. So Peg, which card came up for you this week? I saw Peg made a note. This card came up. Was it the hanged man?
Yes, it was the hanged man.
That makes sense. I feel like that, and I've had the hermit come up for a ton of people this week as well, which obviously makes sense because people are experiencing some form of isolation. Even people that still have to go to work because their work is essential are still experiencing a lot of isolation in that they're, maybe they can't go to their dance classes. Maybe they can't see their friends and family. We're living in a strangely stratified society all of a sudden. Okay, the death card. Dun, 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 dun. This one is very interesting. If you have time later, get on your Google search and just look up the millions of iterations that have been, well, millions is an exaggeration, but certainly hundreds of iterations of the death card that people have put out in the last, 600, 700, 800 years. It's a great opportunity to look at how we have evolved as a society, moving from having monotheism be the default to having monotheism be one of many ways that people express their spirituality. You can really see that in the evolution of the tarot. So the death card, solve et coagula. It is, things dissolve, things come back together. This card comes up obviously for endings, loss, transformation. When it comes up in a reading, again, this is one where someone flips it over and they go, and if you are reading for someone else, you definitely want to say, rarely a card of violent death. Typically, this card comes up to describe the many other kinds of transformations and sort of little deaths that we have in our lives all the time. It can be heartbreak, it can be divorce, it can be the end of a job, it can be the end of a phase of life. Typically, the death card describes more of a sort of shambling, organic, messy closure rather than an abrupt one. I'm looking at you, Mab. It tends to be, the thing about the death card is when it comes up relative to a situation, usually with a minimum amount of self-reflection, somebody can say, I knew that needed to end. I knew we were about there. I figured it was about that time, right? It is rarely, I can see Sako nodding, it is rarely, it's rarely a real shock when the death card comes up. It's a shock maybe to see it written, bold, it's like getting a love note for the universe that says that thing you were doing, it's definitely time to stop. So it can be a bold statement, but it is not, it's not so much a shock as it is a surprise. The death card, one of the ways I like to think about it is the compost principle. I feel is very important in the tarot. That is that, of course, everything that is has to cease so other things can happen. That's why in my version of the death card, while, you can see the Grim Reaper is down there at the bottom, with his scythe, and all the people are in the various stages of, grief and rage and sadness. But above all of this, where no one sees it, there's the phoenix is rising. Out of the compost come the best vegetables, the greatest flowers, the freshest opportunities. But, you have to go through that painful transition that is that death experience. So the compost principle for me is the transformation of the things in your life that are already probably rotten to the core. Again, getting some air around them so that they can stop being putrid and start composting into something that is the healthy underlay for what's coming up for you next. If you think about the sort of during the Victorian times, the cult of mourning, the cult of death, people got so far into it they could hardly see life from where they were standing. And the tarot of the time reflects that. And we have seen in the last 100 years this sort of pivot towards a focus being more about the new beginnings and the fresh start, and less about being fixated on that sort of final moment. Part of the message of the art, the old art, typically there's like a Grim Reaper, there's like a skeleton figure, the scythe. I mean, they're pretty cool, but they're definitely some time traveling. This image, there's a king, a pope, and a child, all sort of either fallen or kneeling around this sort of riding figure of death. And the message that is in that is that while the death card is rarely a card of violent death in a reading, it is the one prediction in the tarot that will come true for everyone eventually. Whether you're king, a prince, whoever, eventually everybody gets there, and finding a way to begin to come to grips with some of that is part of the message of the card. With that notion of out of death comes new things, in the context of a reading, some of the useful concepts are reemergence, renaissance, reinvention, repurposing, releasing old energy and old complexes of emotional pain, complexes of resources, letting go of all of those things and seeing what springs up. That's pretty much the death card. Let me know if you have any questions about it. It's a big one for people. Incidentally, the 10 of Swords, which if we have a few minutes, we'll talk about some of the Swords cards. Ooh. Uh-oh. Sorry, I had somebody just send me a message about the class. The 10 of Swords is another card that comes up often. It's almost like an analogy. It's a twin almost to the death card. It's usually a figure speared through with 10 swords. And that card also says not a card of violent death, but also a card of big transformation. The difference being that the death card can really be all the different aspects of your life. The 10 of Swords is usually a direct result of decisions that we have made rather than big life lessons that we are walking through, if that makes sense. Okay, and then that brings us to the lightning struck tower. And then we'll have some time towards the end. Yay, there it is. We'll have some time towards the end for some questions. The lightning struck tower. Where is it, my Bob? So from the Tower of Babel to skyscrapers galore, this is all about our sassy hubris and trying to reach the stars. Here we go. Boop. Once again, there's my version. Samesies. This card is typically a card that is a representation of there's some kind of a tower or hill or structure. And there are, it's literally called the lightning struck tower in some versions. Boom, lightning bolt, and there's usually people flying out the window. There's a lot of fire, and it's very exciting. Incidentally, I was reading cards during the week of 9/11, and this card was coming up for tarot readers all over the country. So the lightning struck tower, it had a lot to say about 18 years ago. This card, again, you put this card down in a reading and somebody goes, that doesn't look good. As a midwife of information, your job in that situation is to say, this card definitely speaks to sudden change. As the death card is sort of shambling organic change. It's like the sort of natural winding down of a situation. The tower speaks to sudden, abrupt change. Usually it's because there's information, there are forces moving that you didn't know about. There's information that you didn't have. By the time you get to the lightning struck tower, now you suddenly know a lot. You have suddenly had all of the, like the wool has been pulled off your eyes. Circumstances are revealed. So this card is referred to as the mighty brought low. And metaphorically, it's a change in perspective. You were one of these people up in the tower looking out over the land, feeling, that you understood what you saw. And boom, just like that, you get a change of perspective. The tower falls down around your ears and you realize that things are now different from how you had previously understood them. In its shadowy side and its scarier side, again, it is upheaval in your life. It can be upheaval in society. It is change. And as a wise man once said, if you didn't initiate or request change, it's always unwelcome. So it describes that kind of a unwelcome change. It was actually Dennis Proteau that said that, for those of you that know Dennis. This card, typically we experience this card as both dramatic and traumatic. Not so much because it's personal, but just because it's so unexpected. We are creatures to a certain extent, even the adventurous archetypes among us, like a certain amount of known knowns. And this card suddenly pulls that away and leaves us finding ourselves surrounded by so many unknowns that it can be initially paralyzing to our ability to adapt and make choices. But the gifts of this card are myriad. Of course, change of perspective is great. When you didn't have all the information and now you do, that's always a good thing. If you didn't know that you had a health situation and now you know, you have the information to make changes. If you didn't know you had financial issues and now you do, now you're in a position to steward your resources differently. So the change of perspective is a gift that this very scary card can sometimes give. It can be an equalizer as well. It's like when you get that information, other people may too, and suddenly you have an equalization of resources, information. It can equalize power dynamics in certain situations in a way that's really cathartic and helpful. Of course, that which doesn't kill you hopefully makes you stronger. That's part of what the card likes to tell you anyway. It's definitely a trial by fire sort of a situation, and this card gives you that opportunity to sort of sift through the wreckage and decide what part of your old life what is honest, what is authentic, what is real, what you want to keep. So the Tower has a lot to say. Any questions about the Tower? Here, I'm making notes. There are some other cards that come up as guest. They were runner-ups in the scary card department, but these are sort of the most universal. Some of those other cards that are runner-ups for folks can be the Hierophant. Some people find the Hierophant really challenging. It represents institutional authority. And likewise, the Emperor, which is sort of everything that is, it can be everything that is most supportive about a civil society and also everything that is most sort of tyrannical and dogmatic. So that card can be really triggering for people, especially if they have like familial father issues. It can be really provoking for people. I think in previous times, the Moon card was considered sneaky. Because the Moon card, by definition, it is a moonlit landscape. There's a lot of deep shadow. There's a lot of uneven ground. There's a sort of a scorpion coming up out of the water, a harbinger of strange tidings from the deep. I think in our shared generation that the Moon card holds far fewer terrors than it might have previous to, I don't know, maybe the 60s, because we have a different relationship with the natural world than some of our antecedents did. But the Moon card always does speak to, it does speak to some unknowns in your environment. So if you're a person who's predisposed to be afraid of the dark, then that's a card that could present you with some challenges. The Hermit right now, some people really love the Hermit because they are introverts by nature. The Hermit card right now can speak to the terrors for people who are feeling cooped up. And Anne was suggesting also that the Judgment card can certainly be challenging too. And that art, I have to say, is the traditional art in the Judgment card. It's literally people rising up out of their tombs. It's a card of, it looks like a zombie birthday party. There's all these sort of gray skinned people rising up out of the depths, flying towards an angel. And it is somebody's idea of a great day because it is supposed to be a card of resurrection and renewal. But the iconography, if you are not from that culture, is very grim, and it really looks like a scary TV show. But the Judgment card, it is definitely about coming to terms with your legacy, sort of what you have done and who you want to be. So that card can hold terrors. The moral of the story is all of the cards have, they have a shadow side and they have a gift to them. They've got like two different aspects, or you can almost think of it as a spectrum from their sort of best selves and their worst selves. These 5 cards we worked on today all get bad press for having a pretty heavy share of representing our fears of change and destruction. And yet there's a little kernel of that in most of the cards. Right. Oh yes. And you can see Sako's pointing out that the Judgment card also speaks to karma, like the notion that what we put out comes back. I think of it sometimes as the eulogy card, like, how would you like to be remembered? Are you happy with your legacy based on today? How would you answer that question today? Okay. Well, we have 10 minutes left, and we can you can unmute and share some questions if you want to, or I can talk a little bit about a few of the terrors in the PIP cards too. I'm open to what the group would like. Make sure I can see everybody. I think I've got you all on here. Right. Anybody have any preference one way or the other? Have any questions? You're all so civil and quiet. And I know you. You're not all like that. Yeah, Susan? Can you unmute yourself?
The tarot, the tower.
Yes.
Yeah, the tower card. I always thought of it also as it's been built up and built up and built up till it cannot control and it's going to fall down anyway. It never could stay there, or it could never support or sustain something
Right.
healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. There's a great, the Cosmic Tribe Tarot has a version of the tower that is, it is literally, it is a gigantic tower made of TVs with all, it's with kind of false gods and crazy information. It's like selling you, you know, like false visions of how your life could be and how perfect you're supposed to be. And, you know, it's a, another way to represent that same notion of like, this is not reality. This thing that we've built to try to live in cannot sustain forever. Thank you, Susan. Anybody else?
Yeah, actually, I sometimes find when I get the ace cards, I find that intimidating for
Yeah.
some reason.
Yeah, all right, no, we can tell. Let's take a minute to talk
You
about
know?
aces. Yeah, for sure. So the aces, of course, are the very first element of each suit. If you're familiar with the basic tarot, there's 5 suits. There's the major arcana, which is mostly what we're talking about today. And then there's the other ones that you know from playing cards. And they are going to be your wands and your swords and your cups and your pentacles. Each one of those goes ace, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then they've got a bunch of people cards on the end that you also would know from playing croquet with Alice in Wonderland. The ace cards, that's that one that stands for sort of a 0 and a 1 at the same time. And the ace, particularly the Ace of Swords, which historically is actually a card of terror for some people. There's some research to be done there that's really interesting. Mostly the aces are great. They represent the seed of the suit. It's like the raw potential of, you know, say the Ace of Cups, it is the gateway, the threshold, the raw potential of your capacity to feel emotional fulfillment in yourself and with other people. And yet when the aces come up, it's sort of, it's like you've kicked over the anthill, you know, and all of the potential streams out. So sometimes it's a little intimidating. The Ace of Cups is probably the least intimidating, but the Ace of Swords comes up. It's also the Ace of Spades. There's the same thing. And, you know, that is the sword is the element. It's air, it's intellect, it's decisions, and it's boundaries. So it has the sort of literally the double-edged sword that is, it is the ability to assert yourself or the ability to have your boundaries and totally encroached. You know, the Ace of Swords really is, it's the beginning of that capacity to either cut or be cut. Likewise, Pentacles, you know, Pentacles is the beginning of the suit of sort of the world of practical things. So it suggests having just a little something to start with. Maybe it'll grow into a big thing. Maybe it's just a little something. And what's our other one? Wands. Wands is the suit of fire. So it is that suggestion that you're standing on the edge of a burst of flame of creativity and ambition running through your life, hopefully without causing disruption in a bad way. But it depends on the reading. Anybody else? We've got a few more minutes. Let's take a second then to, so we're talking about the swords. Let me check over here. I've got some good questions. Pips. The terrors of the pips. All right. And the swords. So swords, again, are intellect, decision-making, boundaries, the suit of air, our capacity to use our words. Pentacles, health and wealth. It's gold coins and hit points for my gaming nerds. It is the suit of practical things, how well you manage to take care of yourself and manage your resources. Super practical, possibly really stubborn. I'm looking at you, earth signs. Again, wands is fire. They particularly speak to ambition and willpower, the ability to get things done. And what's the other one? Oh, cups again is about that world of emotion. all of the 5s in the pip cards are fairly difficult. The 5s are the cards of chaos. You got to the 4, you sort of, by the 4 of that suit, your 4 of cups, your 4 of swords, you sort of have your legs under you. You are the little lamb in the barnyard who no longer just walks, but they skip and run. And then you get to the 5 and get your legs knocked right out from underneath you. 5s are the chaos cards. So they're all a little bit traumatic, because again, there's that notion that if you didn't ask for change, it's often unwelcome. The 5 of swords is particularly challenging. If you happen to have it in your hand, you can look it up. It's basically somebody who clearly just got their ass kicked by some other people with swords. There's like a field of swords scattered around, and that card is often summed up as defeat. So when that card comes up in a reading, again, if you're reading for someone else, your job is to go, it is what it looks like, but we can translate this into something that can be useful for you. When the 5 of swords comes up, it is often a matter of, are you the one who once again, was beaten on the field? Are you the one who took pleasure in beating someone else? Like, who are you in this scenario, as part of the question that it asks. And it is about, again, decision-making and boundaries. So is this about how you use your words or are cut by others and their use of words? Is it about old habits that perhaps it's time to set aside so that you can have a different experience? That card is very much about somebody is overly reveling in the power dynamic that their power gives them in the realm of swords. In the suit of cups, our 5s are a bit of a terror, because we see a figure that is fallen to the ground or despondent with cup spilling. It's the card of spilled milk. So in my version of that card, there is a person is clearly fallen to the ground, there's cups all a tumble, and there's a horse in the distance sort of grazing, waiting for them to have their very legitimate moment with emotional disappointment and despair. And then, a couple of these cups are already spilled, a couple of them are not. So, if you're so inclined, you may be able to grab and salvage something out of the situation, then get your horse and ride. Yes. Susan, did you have something you want to say about that? Okay. So all of the 5s share this notion of challenge. The 5 of Pentacles, the card of chronic poverty and systemic failure by society. I got it all the time when I was a young person living in a yurt hauling my water every day. Like I was living very hand to mouth, and I got that card all the time, to the point where I said, I know. Let's assume that I always get the 5 of Pentacles. That's what it's like to be a starving artist. But then what? 5s are all challenging. What's the other one that we didn't do? 5 Wands. Oh, 5 of Wands is the card of competition. So again, illustrating that notion of the spectrum from shadow to gift. Competition is not intrinsically bad. Competition can bring you, more and more amazing feats of acrobatic strength. It can also, take the knees out from underneath you. So all the 5s are tricky. Dana says, I have notes from a previous class. You said, overall, the 5s are crap. Yep. Bye, Susan. Yeah, so the 5s are tricky. Again, we're going to jump. We've got just one more second. The 10 of Swords is that card that always says not a card of violent death, but it is always a much needed end to a difficult situation. Usually something where you can look back and go, oh, I had a hand in making that happen. Maybe I should choose differently next time. So there's a quick visit with some of the terrors of the pips. Honestly, we could spend a whole session just on that. But now we're out of time. I really appreciate everyone so much. I hope you have had a good time. I will make this recording available for folks once I figure out how that works, since it's my first day on the Zoom. If you have any other questions, you can drop them in here, and I will try to answer them so that it goes out in the video, and you can still leave, because I know everybody's got other classes to go to. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. I hate to push the end meeting button because everyone's so wonderful.
I know.
Mwah.
See you soon.
See you
Thank you.
next week.
Thank you.
Yes.
Aw.